Hello everyone, welcome back to Guff-Gaaf. Again, I'm your host Sudesh Gurung. So this is my question for you. How many of you think about breathing right now? You don't really think about breathing while breathing. Today's guest will make you think about breathing a little bit differently. So I have my guest today. His name is Aakrist Dongol. He's a breath work coach and my former teammates in my soccer team as well. My good friend. Aakrist, welcome to Guff-Gaaf.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So breath work, this is a really new concept that I discovered a couple of years ago when I met you. And then I got some experience to attend your events and got to learn a little bit about breathing at all. And you are a breath coach. What does breath coach do?
Yeah. So first, to bring it back to the roots, because there's a lot of breathwork techniques out there right now, and it's becoming very, very, very popular. So the roots of breathwork is pranayama, right? So the roots are it's in our blood. It comes from our motherland, Nepal, right? So pranayama, the etymology, the root of that word is prana, yama. So prana is life force, and yama is control. So in the yogic system, pranayama means the control of life force through breathing. So 5,000 years ago, there's monks sitting in a monastery somewhere, really high up in the mountains. And they're using these techniques to create more clarity of the mind, create deeper connection to their bodies, and connect to deeper or higher spiritual realms. So that's what it was initially used for way back, for self-realization, right? And nowadays, what it's primarily used for, it's called now, from pranayama, now it's called breath work in the West. So there's a lot of breathwork techniques out there. Even just you taking a conscious breath right now, you're controlling the life force with your breath, with your mind. So that's technically breath work. But breath work right now, as has become really popular, refers to emotional release modalities that use very intense breathing patterns to create an emotional release or a peak experience. So that's typically what people refer to it nowadays. Now, what I teach, I call it something completely different. I started to call it breath cultivation. I think it's been 2 years now. And the reason is because there's so many breathwork techniques out there, right? And most of them are actually very damaging for breathing function. So I call it breath cultivation because we actually want to cultivate the breath that's already breathing us, right? It's the breath you're taking right now. When you're not thinking about breathing. And that's the most important form of pranayama or breath work, because we don't have a choice but to participate in it, right? And this breath is what dictates the quality of every single cell in our body. Every single cell. So the quality of your breath is the quality of every single cell in your body and the quality of your life. So the way we're breathing is literally how we live and how we love. So when our breathing function, let me ask you this. When you're feeling breathless, you're out of breath, are you available to help other people?
Nope. I want to survive.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're in self-preservation mode, right? We're survival, just looking for resources. And in the West, and just in modern society now, because of all these fast-paced things, fast food, the internet, social media, everything's moving so fast that many people are actually breathless and in a dysfunctional state of living where it's purely survival. So they can't necessarily help others, which is why we see so much war in the world, so much terror, right? All these things that are not actually in harmony with love, with life, with abundance. So the moment we begin to cultivate our breath and come back to ourselves, we come more in harmony with our bodies, with our minds, and now we can actually begin to serve and have more purpose in life. So what I do, I primarily work with athletes to help them improve their performance, break through their plateaus so they're not breathless on the field, so they're beating their records effortlessly. But at the very root of it, breath is the foundation of life. And if we're not breathing, then we're dead, right?
Yeah.
So we want to cultivate the quality of the most fundamental aspect of human health, which is your breath.
Yeah, it's so weird that, we breathe every second. Without breathing, we basically die, right? And we don't think about, like, are we breathing correctly, right? And I remember when we were playing, I think a couple of years ago, playing soccer, I asked you what is the one tips for breathing for athlete, and you mentioned that breathe strictly through nose. Could you please explain that to me? Why?
Yeah, it's the simplest and most powerful shift someone can make. So the nose has 30 plus functions for breathing and respiration. It filters the air, it humidifies the air. So we have hairs in our nose that purify, filter the air. The structure of our airways, it creates a spiral in the air, so it structures the moisture in the air or in the air you're breathing. So it does all these things that help your body actually breathe better. The mouth has one function for breathing. That's for emergency. So when we're breathing through the mouth, the body immediately thinks you're in a state of emergency, right? So when someone's panicked, what are they doing? When someone's anxious, what are they doing? They're often breathing through the mouth.
Yeah.
Mouth is open, and immediately if you're in a room with someone, you can just tap into their energy. The person that's breathing, you can barely see them breathing. They're breathing nasal, they're calm. The person that's breathing through their mouth, you can hear them breathing. That's going to immediately turn on a stress response. So mouth breathing is one of the most damaging things we can do for our breathing function. It dries out your air, it damages the airways, it reduces the amount of oxygen that you're actually getting into your lungs. So just because it's a bigger hole doesn't mean it's actually better for us to breathe that way. Less is more with breathing. So breathing through the nose, we harness all these magical properties of the human body, and we take in more air. Everything becomes easier. So the body actually has to do less work to get more oxygen when we breathe through the nose.
In my own experience too, after that, I try to practice it while playing soccer. That I was like, I'm gonna consciously breathe through, my nose, and when I'm like kicking the ball, like you have to use that force, right? Usually before I was like, like I would kick with my breathing with my mouth, and it wasn't that powerful. Every video story you post, I watch it because I learned something new. And a lot of the times you mention about sport athletes, sharing openly the importance of breathing through nose. Could you please share a little bit about any examples?
I'll share with my story. So when I first got introduced to breath work or any awareness of the breath was my first Vipassana retreat, which is a 10-day silence. So no talking, no reading, no writing. You don't make eye contact with anybody. You're purely with yourself, watching your breath in and out for 10 days. And that's when I had my first outer body experience. So I left my body. I became the room simultaneously. My body's heavy as a rock, but light as a feather. So my awareness I transcended my physical body. So coming out of that experience, the 10 days, I thought to myself, wow, if my breath can do that for me, what else can it do for me? And I played sports all my life, right? Soccer, not all my life, but a lot of my life. And so I immediately, when I got home, books on breath, resources on breath, podcasts, courses, anything I could get my hands on. And I saw a direct improvement in my sports performance. Not even from breathing properly, but just bringing awareness to my breath. How am I breathing when I'm recovering? How am I breathing when I'm on the field? And immediately I saw performance increase. But the thing was, I kept getting injured. The first 3-4 years of my breath practice. I got better, but I kept getting injured. And that was the theme in most of my sports career is overwork, injury, right? And in the West, we have this culture of like just working so hard until you burn out. And that's what a lot of athletes do. They think to get to your next level, you have to push so hard that you're vomiting blood. You can't breathe. You're like lying down, but that's just not the case. And for a lot of people and me, that just results in injury. So it was my first game back from a knee injury, and I want to prove to my teammates I belong. Start me. I belong on the team. I want to prove to my teammates, start me on the field every single game. So I'm flying into every tackle, winning the ball, getting all over the field as best as I can. I'm excited to play. It's my first game back. But my body's just trying to catch up from all that rest and recovery. So it's the 90th minute. There's 2 minutes left in the game, and we're down 2 goals. There's no way we're coming back. Absolutely no way. But I'm still having so much fun. So I fly into this 50-50 challenge. Anybody can win the ball. I run full speed. I shoulder check the guy. And I land on my bad knee. I hear a pop. First game back, injured again. And that's when I knew I wouldn't be playing the rest of the season. So it took me 3-4 more times getting the same knee injured to finally pause and just get surgery. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get surgery. So another 6 months, I can't play, I can't run, I can't do anything. I'm just recovering. This is when I realized, this is when I came across the foundation of what I teach now, which is called Oxygen Advantage, the system I'm trained in. This is when I realized I can actually accelerate my recovery, get on the field faster again, and improve my endurance with a seated practice. When I got back on the field, which I got back faster, I had this brand new baseline of endurance that I'd never experienced before. And I didn't do it through like pushing hard and puking blood. I did it through playing smart. I was lying down the whole time or seated, holding my breath, doing very specific breath exercises to improve my cardiovascular function. And that's when I noticed nobody taught me how to breathe. Not my doctors, not the physios, not my coaches, not my parents, not the teachers. Nobody taught me how to breathe. And it's not their fault. They don't know how to breathe either. They were never taught either. I need to teach this. So the foundation of our performance, which is breath, was compromised. It was neglected. The coach never paid any attention to it. Doctors never told me how to breathe. It's no wonder people are getting injured. It's no wonder we're hitting this capacity in our performance. We can't go any further. So the simplest shift, the lowest hanging fruit is to first breathe through your nose, but that's barely scratching the surface. There's so many more layers to what we can do when we harness our breath, especially for high performers. We become superhuman. There's no limitation. Just like the Sherpa, right?
Right. I've watched a couple of videos of the professional athletes just stating the same thing, right? Like their performance just excelled, doubled once they start learning about breathing, right? And so you mentioned Sherpa, right? Like, what's going on? How are they? Like, they don't have they don't carry oxygen for themselves. They're carrying for other climbers, but they're also on top of the mountain. What's going on physiological to them? Like, what's science behind that?
Yeah, I love it. I love this conversation. And yeah, they're carrying everyone's backpacks.
Yeah.
And they're still breathing normally. And they're doing the most work. And they're like, we know Sherpas are like the most resilient, if one of the most resilient humans on the planet. And the reason is because they have this incredibly rare physiology. And they have a really high red blood cell count. So red blood cells physiologically is what carries oxygen in the bloodstream. So think of it like a river, okay? Close your eyes, everyone. We have a river that's flowing down. On the river, we have boats. Okay, those boats, think of the boats as red blood cells. Every red blood cell carries 4 oxygen molecules. So in that boat flowing down the river, there's 4 humans on it. Okay? Now, the more boats there are with humans, the more red blood cells there are. So the more that river is packed with boats, the more red blood cells you have, meaning the more oxygen you have in your body, the more humans in the river, the more oxygen in your body. So your circulation is the river, right? So the more boats you have, the more red blood cells you have, more humans or oxygen you have in your bloodstream, the more oxygen you have available at any given moment, which means you don't have to do as much work. Every breath you take is so efficient that you barely need to breathe. So Sherpa have a really high red blood cell count, which is why, they're doing so much. They have incredible resilience, endurance, not because they're working hard. They're adapted that way. And it's because they live so high up in altitude, very high up in altitude. I think Nepal, in Kathmandu, I think it's 1,400 meters or feet. I don't know. But Sherpa are like 2-3 times higher than that. At Ottawa, we're about 70 meters altitude, which is basically sea level.
Yeah.
And athletes, they will specifically go to very high altitudes to train into mountains to mimic the Sherpa's physiology.
Oh. Okay.
And because there's less oxygen really high up in altitude, the body learns, okay, I have to be very good at using the oxygen that is available. And the adaptation that's created is put more boats on the river, create more red blood cells. So every breath you take, you're getting more oxygen every single breath.
Wow, that is fascinating. Yeah. I was also listening to a podcast. One of the breathwork coach was in the podcast, and he kept mentioning one nitric oxide, and I've never heard about it, even in my science class. What it is and what does it do?
So in 1998, nitric oxide won the Nobel Prize. So there's so many properties. They call it the magic molecule. It's antiviral, antimicrobial, antifungal, anti-cancer. It's a vasodilator, meaning it opens up your blood vessels. Oh, vaso is blood vessels. Bronchodilator too, meaning it open up your airways. So this gas has all these properties, and it's only produced in two places in the human body. One is the lining of your blood vessels, right? Which is why we exercise, which is why we warm up for exercise. You move, so the nitric oxide in your bloodstream is activated, so your blood vessels dilate, allowing you to get more circulation, warm up faster, so you don't injure yourself. That's one place nitric oxide is created, is in the lining of your blood vessels. The second place it's created in the body is the airways. So everyone take a breath in right now. Every breath you take, you're harnessing nitric oxide in your airways, which is antiviral. So it's your God-given face mask. Antibacterial, antifungal, anti-cancer, and it's a vasodilator. So when you breathe through your nose, it dilates your airways and your blood vessels. Whereas when you breathe through your mouth, it actually constricts your airways and blood vessels. So it has a very important role in breathing, and it's one of the reasons why nasal breathing is so important.
Okay, that makes sense. Direct relation to now nose breathing, right, with nitric oxide. The concept about recovery. How does breathing helps us recover faster with injury? Because right now I'm also dealing with ankle injury. So what can I do to recover faster?
Yeah, great question. Whenever people ask me, what can breathing do for me, right? It's like, what cannot it do for you? So I like to think of it, I'm going to circle back to that specific question, but as humans, we're complex systems. Okay, so there's two things. There's going to be a complicated system and a complex system. A complicated system is a car, right? It's still a system of systems, right. But when you go to the mechanic, everything works in isolation, right? The tire system, the engine system, the speaker system, the windshield system, all of that, the steering wheel, everything is in isolation. So if one thing breaks, you just fix it in isolation, no problem. The human body and nature in general is a complex system. So we're a system of systems, and it's much more complex, right? This is why when we're sick, what do we hear? Drink water, get rest, eat well.
Yeah.
So the solution for a complex system is very simple, whereas the solution for a complicated system is much more complicated, much more comprehensive. For the human body, just a little drop. Simple is best. So breathing is that foundational piece. When we improve our breath, everything in the body works better. So the cornerstone to health is circulation, right? If you don't have circulation, if you hold your arm right now, squeeze it, there's not going to be any blood getting to your arm or your hand. You're going to lose the hand, right? Yeah. And in essence, that's kind of what happens when we're injured, right? Inflamed, we're not able to get blood and nourishment to the tissues that are injured. So the most important thing we can do for an injury is flood it with oxygen through circulation. If we're not getting circulation to an injury, it's not good. It's going to slow down recovery massively. So with breath, the main principle I want you to think of is like, how's my breath going to improve my injury? It's circulation. When we're breathing better, our circulation moves much faster. It's like the Sherpa. So we have so many boats in that river. It's like, go there now. Your recovery is going to be 10x. And if you're a functional breather, you're breathing nasal, your recovery is going to be a lot faster than if you're breathing from the mouth. We can just take a really simple example is sleep, right? I don't recommend doing this, but people have done this experiment where if you try to sleep with with your nose blocked,
Yeah.
only breathing through your mouth, you're not going to sleep well. You're going to wake up feeling so bad. You're going to wake up feeling tired, groggy. Your eyes are going to be really crusty. So what happens to your rest when you're mouth breathing? You don't get any. Circulation goes down. Your nervous system thinks you're in stress mode. Remember, mouth breathing is emergency. So recovery goes down because your body still thinks you're in stress. Still thinks you're running from a lion. But you don't want to be running from a lion because now you want to recover. You want to go into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. And when we're breathing better, we stay in that rested state more often, where we're producing repair hormones and boosting our circulation, and everything works better, and you're going to recover faster as well.
Wow, okay, makes sense. You mentioned parasympathetic. What does that mean?
Yeah. So there's two branches of the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic meaning automatic nervous system.
Okay.
We don't have to think about it. So autonomic nervous system is things like your digestive system, your heart. Your heart beats without us having to think about it, right? It's automatic. We digest without us having to think about it. It's automatic. So there's two branches of the autonomic nervous system, automatic. One is sympathetic, the other is parasympathetic. So sympathetic is the fight or flight branch of the nervous system, right? This is when we go to the gym, we exercise, we do our sprints, we're consciously working out to break down our muscles, and then you go home to rest. Rest is parasympathetic. So when you're in sympathetic mode, your body is only producing breakdown hormones like cortisol, which is a stress hormone. You need it at times, right? Adrenaline, so you need it at times, but when it's when it's active too much, your body's only going to be breaking down, which is why in the West people are so stressed, right? We're mostly in that sympathetic fight or flight dominance where we need to be. Biologically, we're wired to be in parasympathetic 99% of the time, which is rest and digest. When we're sleeping, we're producing repair hormones, we're able to connect with others, and life is joyful.
Interesting. And I thought about, when I get cold, runny nose, and I try to sleep with my nose is basically blocked, right? And I try to sleep, you can't sleep, right? Like, because you're not breathing properly, like you mentioned. That's interesting. I've also seen a post where if you are not breathing properly, then your face actually changes. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. There's Dr. Weston A. Price, and I believe in the 1950s, he did a study. He's a dentist. He did a study on indigenous people, and he looked at their teeth. The very first generation of indigenous people that were introduced to the Western diet, which is like soft food, bread, white sugar, white salt, things like that, pasteurized, their teeth deformed. They didn't have good teeth at all. Whereas the generation right before, who were not introduced to Western society, they had perfect teeth. Breathing function became worse because of the Western diet, because of the inflammation in the Western diet. So they were eating shitty food, meaning they were more inflamed, and to compensate for that inflammation, their body started breathing through the mouth to off-gas the waste.
Oh, okay.
So what that does for the jaw, specifically breathing, is, let's say someone's mouth breathing the whole time, right? Mouth's going to be open, jaw is going to drop, and the face is going to recede. The jaw is going to go back into the skull, and their posture, their neck is going to hunch forward naturally, because to get more air in through the mouth, you have to be in this state, posture. And there's a really important piece to breathing that a lot of breath coaches and breathwork facilitators miss, and that's tongue posture. And this implicates the jaw and the face structure, because the tongue has to be in a specific position, and that is on the roof of your mouth. So notice, where's your tongue right now? Just make a mental note. Is it on the top of your mouth, the side, pushing up against teeth?
Yeah, on top, touching top of my mouth.
Yeah, that's good. So that's a good baseline. That's where we want it to be. And actually, we want it to be up and back into the roof of the mouth.
Okay.
So click. One more click, slow motion. And when the tip of your tongue reaches that little ridge behind your teeth, it's like a little pocket for the tip of your tongue. It's like perfect for the tip of your tongue. That's where you're going to pause it. Close your lips and then swallow. when you swallow, your tongue is going to push up and back automatically. That's where we want our tongue to be most of the time. And what that does is, and actually you want to create more of a pressure, about 60 to 80% intensity of a suction and an up. What that does is the tongue pressure, it pushes up the soft palate in your mouth, and it helps the airway in your nose stay open. And that also pushes your jaw out, which you'll notice. You notice if I push my tongue up, you might see my jaw flex.
Movement, yeah.
Yeah. And if you also put your finger underneath your chin and then press your tongue up, there's going to be a muscle that contracts.
There's movement, yeah.
So when your tongue is in this position, it actually keeps your neck upright. It brings your chin back, so your posture can be proper. Whereas when the tongue position isn't there, which means the mouth, if someone's mouth breathing, their tongue cannot be in that position. So the mouth drops, chin goes forward, but the jaw goes back. Posture becomes like hunched, and that creates a whole host of problems in the body.
Wow. Okay, now it totally makes sense, right? There's not dysfunctional breathing. You're breathing from mouth, and it's actually affecting everything because everything is connected. So you don't like the word deep breathing, rather you like steady breathing. Can you please explain me?
What I noticed is when anybody asks someone to take a deep breath, what I've seen happen is they will try to rush the breath. So when I'm in a yoga class and the instructor asks them to take a deep breath, what I see and what I hear is, and then by definition, it's not deep.
Yeah.
So in our culture, what we have this like perception that the breath comes from the lungs, or we breathe into the lungs, right? So automatically we try to fill up the chest to breathe. It's just an assumption that we have in culture. I don't know where it comes from, but because that's the case, we try to fill up the lungs. So we breathe into the lungs, but we don't actually breathe from the lungs. Our breath is activated by the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, and the abdominal diaphragm. So that's actually where the breath comes from. And the word deep sometimes works for some people, but for most people it doesn't work. It creates pressure. It creates this feeling of, oh, I have to do it now. It's like I have to rush to get this deep breath. It's my only opportunity. And when I ask people to take a steady breath, the pressure is completely released. Just the word itself has this signature and it just creates this emotion of safety and slowing down. And the moment you feel safe and you slow down, you're automatically going to breathe deeper. And what I'm doing here is really, it's a form of hypnosis. Take a steady breath. You can notice if you tune into your body, when I say those two things, your body's going to feel a lot different emotionally. And that response is going to dictate your experience of the breath.
Oh, okay. I was reading a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And
Great book.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book, and it explains where yogis can hold their breath for so long where like basically they're like dead. People think they're dead, but they can come back. So what's happening with them? Like how can they do that? Like what's happening with the breathing itself when they hold?
In yogic philosophy, they say that at 8 breaths a minute, we gain dominion of the mind. We have control over our actions and reactions to external events. At 4 breaths a minute, we're in complete harmony with the universe. All of our actions are in harmony with the universal plan. And Paramahansa Yogananda, the author of the book, Autobiography of a Yogi, he was known to breathe 1 breath a minute.
Yeah.
1 breath a minute, which is nuts, right? So there's something about breathing and respiration that when we start to slow it down, the mind becomes clear, we tap into our heart, we become aligned with our soul's purpose, we become connected to the universe to a much deeper degree, and we can like literally create miracles. Yogananda's teachers are like materializing things out of thin air, miracle healings, bilocating. So I don't know exactly what's happening because science hasn't necessarily proved it. It's starting to prove it now because we're starting to gain the instruments. But my theory is that when we start to slow down breath, mind becomes clear. We're not thinking millions of thoughts, right? And the whole purpose of meditation is to be single-pointed awareness to the point you can manifest and create your reality at the speed of thought. Bilocate, miracles, materialize things out of thin air. So the slower your breath is, the calmer your mind will be. And I would say it's the power of the mind. There's many ways to go about it. Yogis are doing it through the power of the mind, where their mind is so clear that they're not living in survival mode. They're so at peace with themselves that they're fully resourced and they don't even need to breathe. And physiologically, the heart itself is not a pump. The heart is a filter for blood, right? So there's that misconception in textbooks where it's like the heart is a pump. It's not a pump. The heart is a filter for blood. So what does that look like tangibly? You know, when you've just sprinted, what's happening? Your heart is going to beat really fast. Do, 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 do. And that is to get more blood through your body to your muscles, right? But it's actually filtering the blood. So that your heart is, every time your heart beats, it filters the blood faster. So when your heartbeat is really high, it's having to filter the blood and release a lot of toxins and stress in your body, right? Or filter a lot of toxins and stress in your body. When your heartbeat is really slow and soft, it doesn't have to do much to take care of the body.
Right.
So when we look at people like yogis who are at peace with themselves, literally connected to every single thing in the universe, because they're so at peace with themselves, the body doesn't need much.
Okay.
And so the heart doesn't have to do much. And if the heart doesn't have to do much, your breath doesn't have to do anything.
Interesting. You know, how you've been sharing all this information was fascinating, and a lot of people, they don't think about this, right? You have vast knowledge about breathing, and the way you're explaining makes sense, clear to me. How did this come? Like, where did you get this all knowledge? How did you get the experience?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it really sparked. I mean, it started when I took my first breath. You know, I was born in Nepal and lived there for the first 7 years of my life. So when I moved to Canada when I was 7, it was a massive shift. Having to learn a new language, it's like going to a new school, having to make new friends. I didn't fit in anywhere. Not at home, not at school. So there was always this like question of like, why? And what is the meaning of this? What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of life? Eventually it transformed into that question, what is the purpose of life? So when I was in high school, I went to a Catholic high school called St. Pat's in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And in the morning, everyone's doing the morning prayer, you know, the cross in the morning. I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. What is the meaning of this? I go home, there's prayer flags, Hindu, Buddhist tapestries everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm very confused. And that's what really invited me to like ask the question even deeper. Why? And when I went to my first Vipassana, that just sparked everything. That was the floodgate. It was the tiny little shift experience that was like opened my world to what is possible. And since then, with studying my own breath, it's just opened so many doors for me, particularly since COVID. A part of me feels like it's beyond this life. Part of me feels like my soul has come here on a mission, and I chose to be here and experience all these things so I can have this little pocket of experience so I can share it with other people and serve in some way. I love learning. I love reading books. I love science. And at the same time, I'm very experiential. And they say all knowledge is self-knowledge. So a lot of my knowledge is like a mix of the books I'm reading, the friends I'm hanging around with, the trainings, and then my own experience of like, what happens in my body? For example, what happens in my body if I hold my breath for 2 minutes and 30 seconds? What do I feel? And then I can usually tap into, in Chinese medicine, they say this. In respiratory physiology, they say this is happening. And most of the times I can make the link. And then I'm like, okay. And I kind of come to my own understanding first and foremost. And then I'll like read it in a book like Autobiography of Yogi. And I'd be like, cool. Like I came to that conclusion on my own. So It's very affirming in that way.
Okay, yeah. That's interesting. And that's a great way to learn, eh? Like then you just feel like you discovered it, and you won't forget at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about breath work, everywhere like people talk about Wim Hof. I don't know a lot about, but he's into the breath coach as well. What do you know about him?
He was one of my first people that I learned from. Not directly, but when I got out of the Vipassana, which was 2015, Wim Hof was like very much on the rise.
Yeah.
Not as popular as he is now, but he was the most popular breathwork guy because he did a study in 2013, I believe, where with his breathwork technique and meditation, he overcame E. coli. So they injected E. coli, the bacteria, in his bloodstream. He just fought it off with his mind and with his breath. So the whole scientific community was like, what? That's not possible. Nothing in our textbooks, nothing in science in the last 100+ years says this is supposed to be possible. So he completely changed the paradigm of what it means to be human and what human potential is. This man is like climbing mountains with shorts on, It's crazy what he's able to do with his body. I did Wim Hof almost every single day for about 3 years. And his technique comes from the Tumo tradition, which is a Tibetan system.
Okay.
Or Tibetan technique of breath. And the game the Tibetans would kind of play, or like the initiation, the challenge would be, okay, they're up high up in the mountains, there's mountains of snow everywhere. They would take a blanket, soak it in water, put the blanket over the person, over the monk, and they would have to breathe a specific way to create body heat. So that eventually the blanket wouldn't freeze, but it would dry. So it was a really intense practice to activate internal fire, so they would just dry that blanket in this extreme conditions of Tibetan mountains.
Yeah.
That's where he got the inspiration from. That's my understanding. Of course, like he's gone through his life is really interesting. What a wild life he's lived.
The way the thing that you just shared about the Tibetan monks, I heard the exact same explanation by Palga Rinpoche. I heard his episode, one of the podcasts he went to, Ranbir. So he explained the same thing, that he did that as a practice, and well, that's fascinating, right? Like when I was hearing what he was explaining about his practice, that was fascinating, and now it makes sense how it's related to breath too, right?
Yeah.
To be able to generate heat and actually dry the blanket up in the mountain, that's like insane. Like
Impossible. Impossible.
Yeah.
Superhuman. And the thing about the Wim Hof technique is it's so good. Like it was my first practice for the first 3-4 years of my life with my breathwork studies. But I noticed that my breathing actually became worse because of practicing that too much. And just the nature of that breath pattern is mouth breathing, sharp breathing, segmented breathing. So it's the exact opposite actually of what I teach, which is breath cultivation. So I noticed when I did the practice, I felt amazing right after. For like half an hour afterwards, I'm like, whew, clear. My mind is clear. I'm present. But then I noticed that looking back now, my breathing function was actually worse. So that pattern of mouth breathing, because I did it so often, it taught my body how to breathe dysfunctionally. So I was actually more anxious as a baseline general. So I kind of leaned on that practice. It became like cigarettes for me. I had to do that practice to feel good. And this is why I make that distinction now between breath work and breath cultivation. I don't consider Wim Hof a breath coach. I would say he's more of a transformation coach and a breathwork facilitator. We have to look at, again, right, where do these practices come from? It's with the Tibetans, the Yogis up in the mountains, where 5,000 years ago, these practices were preserved, right? In order to even have these practices, you would have to first commit to the trek to the mountain, the pilgrimage, which is like at least a week, probably have to fast, and then you come to the monastery, they would have to accept you as a student. And then you're there for at least a year of just doing meditation. And so there's a massive initiation process to receiving these practices 5,000 years ago, right? So they would already have a degree of mind mastery, health, when they're doing these breath practices, which are very intense breathing patterns. And they're living high up in altitude.
Yeah.
So their breath is preserved and protected. Whereas today, someone can just Google Wim Hof, including the person with sleep apnea, including the person with asthma, including that person with COPD, anemia, which is very dangerous. So what we need to be doing is, first and foremost, we need to honor and cultivate the breath that's already breathing us, the foundation. Only then do I believe it's actually appropriate and safe to practice more intense breath works.
Makes sense. You brought me something today here. What is this? Can you please explain?
Yeah, so
What do you have for me?
there's a few things in here. This is a partial, so I give all my students breathing kits. This is a partial breathing kit. So we have a nasal dilator here. This you're going to put in your nose, and this is going to keep your airways open so you can breathe easier. So it makes your nose bigger so you can breathe easier. And this is mouth tape. So that one actually goes over the lips. So you put it over the lips, and it's an elastic, so you stretch it, and then when you close it again, it pushes the lips in. This prevents you from breathing through the mouth when you're sleeping.
Okay.
And what I do is I just cut it up and I put it on my lips, because I have facial hair, so it doesn't really work over my lips anyways. And this it's an earplug, but what I use it for is a nose plug.
Okay.
I put it in my nose, and I get my students to put it in the nose, because now we're single-sided breathing. There's certain techniques where we'll do one-sided breathing, because each side of the nose activates a certain part of the brain.
Really?
So we can shift, if you want to be more creative versus more focused, or like more rested versus more active, you can dictate that with which side you're breathing.
Okay. I think I heard similar anulom bilom,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a nostril breathing where you close one side and the other side. And one of the sessions that I attended of yours, that was something you taught, right? What's happening with that? Like, can you enlighten a little bit more?
Yeah. So the left side of the nose, when you breathe through your left, it's known to activate the right side of your brain.
Okay.
When you breathe through the right side, it's known to activate the left side of the brain. So the left side of the brain is more logical, right? Math, language, and like numbers. So it's very chop, cut, sift, very logical. Whereas the right side of the brain is creative, right? So how I think of it is, draw the L, it's a very hard L.
Yeah.
Whereas the R is very curvy, creative. So the right side is creative, left side is logical.
Okay.
What that looks like in physiology is the left side is going to be more calming for the body, whereas the right side is going to be more activating for the body.
Okay.
So if you need to warm up for exercise, you can, if you really need to and really like are in a short time crunch, you can breathe through just the right side of your nose. So you can put that in your left nostril, warm up that way. But if you need to calm down, you need to fall asleep, you can just breathe through the left. But what we usually do with the Anulom Bilom is you create a balance of both hemispheres, so we switch.
Oh,
So there's many applications to this,
Yeah.
but primarily it's to single-sided breathing. You can also slow down your breath. So when you're breathing just through one nose, it's a lot harder to breathe. You're going to feel more suffocated, which that feeling is actually good to some degree,
Yeah.
because that's carbon dioxide rising, and we want to cultivate more carbon dioxide. And there's
This
one more
one.
thing in here.
Sure. Okay.
So not necessarily bite on it, you put it in between your teeth and just leave it in there. So whenever we're doing breath practice, we leave this inner mouth between our teeth. And what this does is it prevents the teeth from touching. Whenever the teeth touch, it creates a signal to the brain that you're under stress.
Oh.
So think about it like, when people grind their teeth,
Yeah.
grinding is, it's associated with anger, it's associated with frustration, which is stress. So when the teeth touch, even if it's just a touch, it creates a fractal of a stress response, a grinding response. So when it's not touching, you don't have that activated stress mode.
Is there a link between breathing and snoring?
So snoring is really fast breathing.
Okay.
Snoring is when you breathe really fast and then the back of your throat collapses.
Yeah.
So whenever people are breathing really fast, they're gonna be snoring, and eventually the snoring becomes sleep apnea,
Right.
which is sleep. Apnea means breath hold, where they're breathing so fast that their airway collapses and they hold their breath when they're sleeping. They can't breathe, and then suddenly they wake up
Yeah.
to take a big gasp of air.
Yeah. And that could be dangerous, right? With the sleep apnea, could be dangerous.
Yeah, the body will always wake up.
Yeah.
The body's programmed to wake up. However, you cannot get a good night's sleep with sleep apnea. It's impossible. People are living with a machine that helps them breathe,
Yeah.
which is a big problem.
I have a quick segment that I'm going to ask you a quick rapid fire. Okay. What comes to your mind if I say breathing?
Soft.
What is one thing that's biggest myth on breathing?
More is better.
More is better.
Less is more. Dead space is, okay, place your finger on your nose and then one at the entrance of your lungs.
Yeah.
So this is dead space, this space between here. So this is where no gas exchange happens. So every breath you take, there's a portion of the air that's stuck here and doesn't get into your lungs. So it doesn't actually get into your bloodstream. So think of it like, you're sipping a smoothie. You order a smoothie, you're sipping with the straw, you're going sip, sip, sip. If you stop sipping, whatever's in your mouth, you get to drink, but whatever's in the straw, you don't get to drink.
That's right. Yeah.
So that is dead space. So every breath you take every inhale you take, there's a portion of it that's dead space. Let's say it's 1 second. So if you breathe in for 2 seconds, which is a fast breath, which you're going to be able to get a lot of the fast breaths in a minute, but 1 second is dead space, meaning you're actually only getting 1 second of air in your nose or in your bloodstream, right?
Can you breathe out anxiety?
Sometimes, but your breath will definitely reduce anxiety when done properly.
Okay. If you can give only one breathing advice to someone,
Breathe through your nose as best you can.
breathing practice, do you like in the morning or in the evening?
Morning is best.
Morning is best.
First thing in the morning, set your day up for success.
What's one misunderstanding people have for especially people who talk about breathing, like breath coach?
It's that breath work improves oxygenation. It's that breath work improves breathing function. It's not always the case, which is why I make the distinction between breath work and breath cultivation, because a lot of breath work techniques are actually doing the exact opposite of what we want and damaging breathing.
Breath cultivation, peak breathing. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so Peak Breathing Academy is my business, and I run a program that is a 6 to 7 week program. And it runs about every 2-3 months or so. And inside the program, you learn all the fundamentals of breathing. So you learn the science of breathing, you learn how to restore your breathing function so that you're sleeping better, you have more focus throughout your days, you have more energy, you're more present for your relationships and for your teammates. And then once that's established, we ascend the practice to something called high altitude training. This is where we mimic the physiology of the Sherpa. So we trick the body into thinking we're living really high up in altitude so that we produce more red blood cells. So we have that superhuman physiology, so our endurance is unstoppable. We can run forever, we're recovering rapidly, and we're breaking through our athletic plateaus like that, and breaking our personal records and becoming superhuman in essence. I'm on socials, and on my social media there's a link tree. So you can click on the link tree and it'll be the first button, will take you to the program details. And then you can apply. There's a button there you can apply, book a call on my calendar, and then we'll see if it's a good fit for you, see if I can even help you with what you're wanting to improve, and then we go from there.
Definitely recommend this practice. I'm sure that it's going to help a lot of people. How was your experience coming here, having Guff-Gaaf with me?
I loved it. The studio is beautiful. Yeah, it was really fun, and you asked great questions.
Thank you again. Thank you very much for coming. And like honestly, you are my top on my list. Okay, when I thought about it, when I was writing the guest list, I was like, I know, like I have to invite Aakrist because what he does, like people have to know you. It's an introduction to the audience, and I'm sure we're gonna meet again, dive deep into breathing, go more advanced level as well, because I want to learn that as well. And it was very enlightening, like I said, you explain things really simple way where it's understandable for anyone. So coming here, having this conversation, thank you very much. Is there any advice you have for me?
For you, and I guess all of our listeners as well. And just when I was sitting in that silence, and I was thinking of what to say, that it's the richness of silence and how much nourishment there is, and this realization and this awareness that we have everything we need, and our breath is one of the most powerful medicines on the planet, and it's free. For most of us, it's working against us, but the moment it starts to work for us, then we are literally limitless. And so when we reclaim our breath in general, we reclaim our health and we reclaim our biological sovereignty, because nowadays, the medical system is really failing us, and it has been failing us. There's certain things it's really good at, but most things it's not. And so it's really important for us as human beings in general, and us as a community, to really take care of our health, because without health, there's nothing.
Yeah. Great advice, and thank you very much for coming. Looking forward to many, many more conversations.
Yeah, me too, man.
Okay, Aakrist Dongol. See you again. Thank you.
Ciao.